A Kentucky family is asking why is their son, their brother, their cousin dead after he was in distress, killed by police. Folks, the latest example of mental health going wrong. In Kentucky, folks, this took place on Saturday. Desman LaDuke was in a mental health crisis. According to reports, police were called because he threatened to harm himself. It took his aunt about an hour to get to the scene. When she arrived, cops from Nicholasville, Kentucky Police Department with drawn guns and assault rifles surrounded the house. The video, folks, we're about to show you was recorded by a neighbor moments before an officer fired through the home, striking Desmond in the chest.
Oh, fuck.
The story from police is that when officers arrived, they were confronted by an armed individual when they entered the home. Todd Justice, the police chief of the Nicholasville, Kentucky Police Department, said, "It is always difficult for family members in our community when a tragic event like this occurs. Our officers do their best in difficult situations like this with the immediate threats to the safety of themselves and others." The family says that did not happen and released this statement. There have been very limited information released regarding the circumstances of Saturday. Much of what has been said is false, and the police have done nothing to correct it. Desmond was alone in his home inside his bedroom when he was shot through the bedroom window by a police officer positioned outside the home. Any suggestions that officers made entry to Desmond's home were threatened inside the home by Desmond and shot Desmond from inside the home are false. Nothing has been said about Desmond's character, his kind nature, and the type of person he was. Everyone who knew Desmond was familiar with his amazing personality. Desmond was a running back during East Jessamine's magical 2016 district title run. He was a hard worker. He would do anything for anyone. He had no criminal record. We have had his former teachers, friends, and coworkers of Desmond reach out to us since Saturday to share their memories made with him. They are all positive and full of love, unselfishness, and joy. Desmond lived through a lot of tragedy and struggle. He lost his mom to a car accident in 2011. He lost his brother to a drowning 3 years ago. So understandably, certain days were really hard for Desmond to cope with these losses. On Saturday, Desmond was struggling with the desire to live. We asked the police to help him. They responded by sending the SWAT ERT unit. 9 different officers in tactical gear promptly surrounded Desmond's home and pointed assault rifles at the doors and windows. Patrol officers remained across the street. The woman who had raised Desmond since his mother's passing arrived on the scene. She begged and pleaded for the SWAT unit to stand down. She insisted that she be allowed to go into the home to talk to Desmond, to hug him, and to tell him that everything would be okay. This request was not only denied, but also came with a direct warning to Melissa that she would be tackled if she tried to go talk to her son. After an hour and a half, while Desmond was inside his home by himself, an officer shot through his bedroom window. The bullet struck Desmond in the chest. Officers made entry and then proceeded to drag Desmond across the ground through the bedroom, the hallway, the living room, and the kitchen. Officers left a heavy trail of blood on the floor for the family to discover hours later. When close to 20 officers were inside the home, and as Desmond was dying on the kitchen floor, other officers entered yelling, "Show me your fucking hands," to him and yelling at him that it was his fault. The remaining officers stood around as if nothing had happened. 4 hours after Desmond was taken by EMS to UK hospital, he died. We are devastated, confused, angry, frustrated, heartbroken, and struggling since Saturday. Nobody from the police department has come to express condolences. Nobody has given us any answers as to why they took Desmond's life. Desmond needed help. He did not harm anyone. He was alone in his home. 9 rifles being pointed at his doors and windows by officers in tactical gear did not do anything to defuse what was an obvious mental health crisis. A tactical kill shot through a window and into Desmond's chest was not the solution. We are grateful for all of those in the community who have shared the great memories they made with Desmond, and we urge everyone to help us get an understanding as to why Desmond was taken from us. The silence is killing us. Folks, we spoke to his aunt, Melissa Marks. She declined our invitation to appear on the show tonight as they prepare for Desmond's funeral tomorrow. My panel, Michael Imhotep, hosts the African History Network show. Dr. Larry J. Walker, assistant professor, University of Central Florida. Dr. Cleo Monago, social architect, chief advisor, Black Men's Exchange. Glad to have all 3 of you here. Cleo, I'll start with you. I mean, this is, we've done so many of these stories. And when it's an obvious mental health crisis, you don't send cops with guns. You send mental health experts.
Well, if I'm not mistaken, the family called the cops. And it's not a good idea to call the cops when a mental health crisis is occurring, particularly when it's a black male central to the crisis. So this is just another one of those situations where the cops are going to say there was a live gun in the presence of them, and they had to defuse it the best way they could. And that's going to be the explanation. I'm not sure the family will be able to talk any kind of support into being from the police department because the young man indeed had a gun. Now, they know more about the young man's state of mind than the police do. So they came to do what police do, to defuse the situation by any means necessary. So, yeah, it's very unfortunate. And unfortunately, this mostly happens to men who are dark skinned or who are not white, which clearly shows a bias in people's impulses. So it's another tragic story. As you know, it's one of hundreds that we know about. However, again, I think the cops are going to say that there was a live gun and that the person was emotionally or mentally unstable. As far as they're concerned, means they were in particular danger because they didn't know what kind of state of mind he was in and what he was going to ultimately do. So they defused it the ultimate way. However, police need to stop being so abusive. I mean, they murdered him and then they dragged him around, and his last days were highly traumatizing, and it's just a terrible situation to imagine. However, there was a gun involved, and that will be the focus of the police.
What jumps out at me is I want to see if there's body cam footage. I want to see if the cops were correct in that they breached the home as opposed to firing through the window, which raises the question, why would you be firing through a window if he was home, inside the home alone? If no one was inside that home and he wasn't threatening or harming anyone, what is the rationale for firing a weapon through a bedroom window?
Right. Who was that question for, Roland?
Larry.
Oh, okay.
Roland, this is rinse and repeat on these situations revolving Black folks and, whether they're mental health crisis or having other challenges. And, my colleague was talking about, when members of the Black community call law enforcement, the reality is there aren't a lot of options. And there particularly aren't a lot of options if there's an under-resourced community. I'm not familiar with the area in Kentucky, but, whether it's urban, rural, suburban area, sometimes they don't have the necessary resources to deal with mental health crisis. The real question is in terms of not how law enforcement decided to end this crisis was to shoot him from outside of the home. This makes no sense. It's clearly if he's in the house by himself, he's only a threat to himself. And law enforcement should have taken the time to wait him out or let someone from the family talk to him over an extended period of time to just talk him down. But taking this young man's life while saying he's obviously, a threat, but you're outside of the home and then you shoot him, it just doesn't make any sense. And Roland, this also goes to this idea of how we properly train law enforcement. First of all, to see the humanity when it comes to Black folks' humanity. Second of all, in terms of taking the time to understand that individuals when they're in mental health crisis, that there are a lot of things going through their mind. And obviously you read the statement in terms of all the tragedies you dealt with over the last several years. But once again, this is rinse and repeat also when it relates to these statements that law enforcement put out, when they kind of blanket statements and say, they want to protect the community. But the bottom line is when you commit these kind of acts, particularly against Black folks, the members of the Black community and other minoritized populations don't feel safe. So it's really important, once again, we get to the bottom of this, and my condolences to his family.
Michael, we've seen so many other stories like this, and I think a lot of times what happens is cops are involved in this, and they're sick and tired of this thing going on and on and on, lasting an hour and a half. They want to shut it down. We've seen other examples, same thing, where they were upset with how long the situation, and then, let's shoot to kill. But if you're the police chief, again, I just keep saying to people over and over and over again, death is final.
Right.
This isn't shot in the leg, wounded. It's death. Can't come back from that.
Exactly.
And so shooting someone to death should be absolute last resort in any situation.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is an example of why some people should definitely not be police officers. But in reading the article from ABC Channel 6 and watching the video segment from their news broadcast, two negotiators from the crisis negotiation team were dispatched. And it appears from the reports that there were negotiations that were going on for close to 2 hours, but somehow the negotiations deteriorated. And what I'm trying to find out is, okay, so how did it go from the negotiations deteriorating with the two crisis negotiators? How did it go from that to him being shot and killed? There's still a lot in reviewing this story. There's still a lot that's missing here. And along with the two negotiators, the special response team was deployed also. So I'm trying to figure out, how did it go from them trying to negotiate with him, and these are trained negotiators, how did it go from that to him ending up dead and an officer shooting through the window, and he's apparently in the house by himself. So something doesn't add up here. I don't know if this is the case that the Department of Justice will pick up. It sounds like maybe it's one they should investigate. But yeah, this is another example why, some people should not be police officers at all.
Look, I don't care if a standoff lasts 8 hours.
Right.
Death is death. It's finality. And I would rather spend 8-10 hours trying to defuse the situation, utilizing the family as best as you can to do so, than to kill somebody. And I think that's really has to be the state of mind with a lot of these police departments. And this is also why when people get mad when they hear defund police, one of the things they talk about is shifting resources away from, lethal action to mental health services. But folks never seem to want to deal with that. All right, folks, back to our Roland Unfiltered video in just one moment.
We've got to stand up. Republicans are banning abortion rights, tearing down democracy, blocking progress. But when Democrats stand together, we win. Because we voted, Democrats stood up for Black lives, voting to ban police chokeholds, stood up for Black women, putting one on the Supreme Court, stood up for our families, lowering cost of health care and prescriptions and capping insulin, and stood up for millions by slashing student debt. This November, let's stand up together and keep making progress.
This is our time, our moment to move forward. Beyond the gun violence, the hospital closures, the unaffordable housing, Brian Kemp's Georgia for the wealthiest few. Stacey Abrams is looking out for every Georgian. She'll invest our $6 billion surplus in the fundamentals, education, healthcare, housing, and a good living, putting more money in your pocket to build one Georgia where everyone has the freedom to thrive.
Folks, Black Star Network is here.
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Support this man, Black media. He makes sure that our stories are told.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America, Roland.
Stay Black. I love y'all.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?